Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. I installed that light that I got at the Toronto Bonsai Society's auction, their end of the year auction. So let's head downstairs and I'll show you what it looks like. All right, down we go. So here it is. I installed the light up top there. So you can see that it's still a little brighter underneath my LED shop lights here. It's a little brighter here, but there's good light coming over to the far reaches over here now. So it's fairly even in the room now. The whole room's a lot brighter. It's going to help all these trees that are kind of on the edges here. You can see they're getting really good light now. Before they were all kind of just dim and dark. And even the ones back here are getting really good light on them now. And with these cool temperatures, that's all they need. They just need a little bit of light. And even from these windows, when the sun is shining, it comes in through the windows and hits all these trees here, which is amazing. They're just small windows, but you still get some light from them. So that's good. I'm glad to get that job done. There's the light up there. Compact fluorescent. I mentioned that everything down here is dormant except for the jades, and I'll show you some of the jades. So here's the one I got from Connor back here. And you can see there's kind of new growth on it, that kind of brighter colored growth. That's all new from being in the basement. There's another one here. I think this is it's either the Scott Winter jade or the arm-sized jade, the top cutting off of it. One of the two. I'll have to check my videos and find out. Here's that cutting of the Gollum jade here. Looking really good. My rat tail jade here is looking really, really nice. Yeah, everything's doing quite well. Nice to see. It's my Sarissa, looking good. It even had a few flowers on it. Calendar tree, that one. Let's head outside now and begin today's bonsai work. It's another warm day outside, 4 degrees Celsius or about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. With the sun kind of trying to shine in the greenhouse here, it's t-shirt weather in the greenhouse. Today I'm going to be working on my Osage orange forest. This forest was grown from seeds. They germinated in June of 2019. So they've gone through 3 growing seasons and they'll be entering their 4th growing season this year, which is very exciting. You can see there's many, many trees in the forest. It's a very densely planted forest. And the trees are grown in the, I'd have to say, the upright forest style, where they're all tall and vertical with just a small canopy on the top of each tree. If you have a forest that's this dense, you can't have massive canopies on each tree. Otherwise, they shade out all the trees around it. So you have to keep them very slim. So that's been my goal, is to keep this a very dense forest, at least for now. If it starts becoming a problem, if I have too many trees in here, then I'll have to thin the forest out, taking some of the trees away and making it a little less dense of a forest, but giving each tree a little more room. The other possibility is you can put it in a larger pot, separate all the trees and spread them out a little more. So I don't know if I want a larger forest. This is sort of it's not that big a pot. It's quite easy to move. It's quite practical. When you start getting into the larger forests, like my larch forest here, in this big mica pot, it becomes heavier, harder to move, and just a little more awkward. So it's nice to have some small forests like this one. I'm going to start the work today by cleaning up the forest floor. There's all kinds of leaves, debris, and weeds. So I want to clean that up, and then we'll start the pruning work on the trees. I'm using my tweezers, and I just grab all the debris, put it in this box, And when the box gets full, I just compost the whole box, cardboard and all, and get a new box and begin filling it up again. So far, my Osage oranges have been growing really well. I've had no problems with insects or disease or anything like that. They've just been good, solid growers. They are native to this area. This is their very northern extreme range, or the northern limit. So they do exist in the wild. I've never seen one in my area, but I'm sure there's some out there. They're not real easy to see in the forests. I'm sure in the future I will, pull one of these trees out to grow as a specimen tree, or maybe a larger bonsai. But for now, I'm really happy just having them in the forest, growing as a group. It's I really enjoy it. It's really cool to look at. These have fairly small leaves, and it's nice to see the shade underneath the forest on a sunny day. There's been a lot of pine needles falling down on the forest floor from the neighbor's white pine. It always sheds its needles in fall. The old needles. And these are all the leaves of the Osage orange here. Eventually, all these Osage orange trees will get a striped bark on them, similar to that of a citrus tree. That's why they're called an Osage orange. They do get a big, huge fruit on them. I don't really expect mine to get fruit, not when they're this small, that's for sure. The fruit would be very, very large. And it would probably break the trees. So even though these trees are, fairly hardy, I do protect them in the winter. I kind of treat them like Japanese maples. I don't let them go below any colder than about minus 10 degrees Celsius, or I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, probably 20 degrees Fahrenheit, somewhere around there maybe. So yeah, they can take some cold, but when they're in the pots like this, they're not as hardy as a tree in the ground, because the ground usually stays warm in the winter and rarely freezes anymore. Especially if you have a good layer of snow, the ground stays quite warm underneath the snow. So it's getting a natural covering of moss on the forest floor here. I didn't plant that. However, it's also got a bit of liverwort and a few weeds. So I'm going to try and clean that up and encourage the moss to continue growing over the next year, covering the forest floor. In some of these sections where I'm weeding, there's liverwort here. So I'm taking the top layer off the soil. You can see the liverwort in there. There's this Scotch moss here that I'm trying to pull up by the roots. And sometimes, my soil level's a little low here, so I would rather dig the weeds out properly and then top my soil level up with fresh soil. It's better to get the weeds out than to, worry about your soil level and what your surface looks like. Because you can always top it up with fresh soil and then plant a bit of moss on it, and you'll never know there was weeds in that area. So most of the weeds are out on the outer edges of the forest where they get light. As you go towards the interior of the forest, the weeds get less and less because it's in the shade of the Osage oranges. I have got the surface of the soil all cleaned up of weeds and liverwort, and there's still a bit of liverwort intertwined with the moss in here, but it doesn't grow much in the shade there. I'm going to have to repot this forest. It's in a mica pot, and there were times last year that the forest was looking really, really good, and I thought, that could almost go in a show. So I think it's getting close to being show ready, even though it's only going to its fourth season from seeds. There's a charm about a forest like this. At this stage, All the trees are young, they're miniature looking. It looks like, if you come up here, it looks like you're really in a forest looking around. As these trees get thicker and more mature, they kind of lose that miniature look. So my goal here is to keep these trees looking miniature, kind of slim like this, restrict the growth so they don't, take off and become really thick. That's my goal, because I like this look to the forest. And as these trees get more mature, the bark starts getting older looking. I think it'll retain the density of the forest, and it'll retain its charm, but it'll just look like an older forest. And I think that'll be a nice look. So when I repot it, I'm thinking a pot about the same size, just a nice, probably like a glazed pot or something like that. So that'll be coming probably this spring. I'm going to begin pruning the forest now. So the first step is to step back and look at the overall profile of the forest. And this one, you can see the tallest trees here, and it kind of rounds. It's like an asymmetrical rounded triangle. That always looks nice in a forest. What you don't want is your trees coming straight up and flat across the top. That might, it could look like a section of a forest. There's a lot of forests where all the trees are the same height, like a coniferous forest or something. But in this one, I want it to look interesting from the distance. So that's why I have it. The top of the canopy is sort of an asymmetrical triangle. So when I'm pruning, you can see I want kind of a profile like that, and then over here more like that. You can almost see where it was pruned previously. And then all the new growth is up top here. So that's what I'll be pruning for, that kind of a profile. And my goal is also to try and keep the trees slim at the top, so they don't have thick, coarse, heavy branches at the top. So I'll always be replacing thicker branches in the apex of the trees with newer, thin ones. I'm just dressing up the tips of my pruners before I begin pruning, cleaning them up, getting them nice and sharp with a fine stone. That should be good. All right, so here I go. I'm going to start with the main tree here. So it comes up, there's a trunk. My first branches start at this level. It comes up, it's got good branching. Now here, you can see it's getting quite thick here. So I could at least prune this back part off, and I will. So here I go. Like that. Nice cut. That helps a lot, helps slim down the apex. I can take a stub off here. I can prune this back. I'm looking for buds when I prune. Take the tip off there. This branch is a little thick here. There's a bit going out the back that's interfering with the tree beside it here. I'm going to take the stub off here and take this one back to here. And this one can be taken back to here. That helps a bit in that area. Just cleaning up some stubs. This one can be taken back a bit further. And I can take the stub off the top here. So that's got that main tree cleaned up, kind of simplified. It's not perfect, but it's all right. So I'll do the tree beside it now. You can see it has a really long shoot here. So I want to prune that back. There's a bud in here, so I'll just go to here. This one. This is my main tree. This one's a little tall. It's actually taller than my main tree. I think I want to take that down in height. There's a bud right here. I could take that top off. Like that. This one, I'm looking for buds. There's probably a bud at the base of each one of these thorns. It looks like there is. So I think I'm going to take it off here, like that. That kind of gets it a little shorter than the main tree. There's a branch here I can prune back. And the rest I think is good on that tree. There's a stub I can clean up here. Always clean up your old pruning stubs. I don't know if this branch is alive here, but I'll leave it for now. You can always clean it up in spring when the leaves start to come out. Okay, so I'll keep pruning away. I think it's just a matter of, keeping my profile and taking the trees back, making them more compact, and maybe a bit of replacing some of my coarser branches with some finer new ones. Prune these ones back. Ow! That one got me in the finger. Oops. Here's an example. If I look at this tree, it has a slim trunk coming up here, and then there's a thicker branch coming towards the front, so I can take that right off. Getting rid of that thicker branch, keeping a slimmer apex on my tree. So whenever you can do that, it's a good thing to do, to keep your upper part of your tree slim. You can see this tree, it's kind of thick up top here. This would be a better apex. It's a little on the short side, but I'm going to do it anyway. Can always grow it a little taller if I need to. Just pruning back some of these longer ones. I have to watch the thorns, they're pretty sharp. I'm going to take that one off. It's shading out the tree beside it. Give this tree a bit of light. So that's another thing you have to keep, being aware of, is that each tree has to have a spot of sunlight. You can't have branches from one tree growing across, shading out the trees beside it. So all the trees have to share the sunlight. They have to learn to get along. My forest profile is looking quite nice from the front view. I'm just kind of refining that. So zombie apocalypse. Here's a look at the forest profile, so you can see it kind of comes up. It's an asymmetrical, rounded, triangular shape. Now from the side view, you want forced perspective. So you want your taller trees in the front, tapering away to the back. So let's rotate it around. There's my side view. So you can see I do have my tallest trees here, and they're tapering back. So the trees in the background should look like miniature versions of the trees in the foreground. That creates a nice sense of depth in the forest planting. So I think you're beginning to see that. I think some of the trees back here look like they're definitely in the distance. They could probably be shortened a little more, so I'll work on that. Okay. Here's one that can be shortened. Reducing the height here of a lot of these trees at the back. You can see that's improving it. Now I do have a few shorter trees in the front here, but that's fine. You don't want... If you don't have shorter trees in the front, it looks like this is like the edge of your forest. So you got their tall trees in the front. This way it's kind of a transition into the taller trees. So from the side view, you also have an asymmetrical, rounded profile. If you have just, your tallest trees in the front, it's abrupt. It's like a wall of tall trees. This way there's a transitional element to the forest. Yeah, it's looking better from the front. You can see these small, shorter trees in the back look like they're really far away. I think I need a little more transition from these shorter trees to the tallest ones, so almost like a straight line. So it might involve a little more hard pruning on some of these taller trees here. I mean, you don't want it perfectly in a line, but you want that general feeling. A little shorter there. A bit of a brutal operation, but it looked nice once they all branch and leaf out again. Yeah, that's looking even better. You can see the tall trees, the mediums, and then the small trees behind. It's more of a gradual transition, which can still be improved, I think. So I'm pruning all the trees to kind of fan out from the center of the forest, all the branches. So I'm using directional pruning where I can. I'm a little tall on this end still too. I'm going to have to hard prune this one back. Take this one off. Maybe even go back to here on that outside tree and here. Again, I'm rotating the forest around, looking at it from all angles. I'm definitely getting that nice perspective there. Looks very interesting when I rotate it from the front. You see all the different heights of trees. Gives lots of perspective. Okay, I think I'm going to stop here. Let's have a look at it. Let's fly in. Here's a look at what I took off today. A lot of snipping of tips and trimming them back. Not, a whole lot of big cuts. There were a few like this one. But most of it was just kind of trimming it back slowly, getting that shape worked out. Here's a look at the forest now. We'll fly in. So this is just one possible forest style. This is kind of, I guess, a distant view of the forest where you see all the trees in perspective. Has a pleasing profile to the overall forest canopy. It's a fairly dense forest and it's a young forest. But I think once the leaves come out and it begins branching, it's going to look very, very nice. That's what I hope anyway. Let's go have a look at it from above. Yeah, so that's kind of the front view, and I'll show you the side view now. There's the side view. You can see that forest perspective. Yeah, very nice. I'm so glad I got this forest pruned up. I can't wait for spring when it starts shooting out those nice little green leaves. I'm going to give the forest a watering. So here I go. Just make sure it's thoroughly soaked. Even though this forest is only 3 years old, there's a big difference between a bunch of seedlings thrown in a pot and the forest as it stands. All these trees were graduated from thickest and tallest to thinnest and smallest when they were planted. That kind of sorts out the genetic characteristics of the trees. So the trees in the center of the forest are always growing stronger than the ones at the edges. So that's an important part. Getting the spacing of all the trees is much different than just randomly putting a bunch of seedlings in a tray. And then getting this overall profile of the forest cleaned up is another important step forward for this forest. So this forest, even though it's going into its 4th year of growing, I think it's getting close to where it could be a showable forest. The seedlings are still young. They don't have mature bark, but I think the overall arrangement of the trees is quite pleasing. And I think once it leaves out, especially in spring, I think it'll be a really nice forest image. I've got one more tree I want to prune up today. It's today's update. And that is my Russian olive. Here is a look at the Russian olive. So this was grown by Derek in the Toronto Club from a seed. And you can see it's doing really, really well. Thickening up, getting some nice branching. It's just lost its leaves. They're just sort of green, oval leaves. fairly small. It's in a root maker pot. You can see that. So it will need repotting this spring. I'll get it underway. So today I'm going to prune it. You can see there's a lot of branches that have just grow long and straight. So I'll be pruning it back sort of to a, I guess, a stick once again. All right, here I go on the pruning. So you can see the trunk comes up. It's got fairly good taper in this area. This branch is really thickened up and shot up. So if I prune it off, I have a good amount of taper, or a good opportunity to create taper there. So I'm going to take it right off because, you know, I could make that the trunk line, but then there's no taper from here up to here. So I'm going to take it right off. So here I go. Like that. So there's one cut. Big branch come off. And then the other branches, I just want to shorten them back and make them a little more compact. I've got that thick branch pruned off now, so I'm looking up at these branches, and this one I have a bud facing down, bud facing up. I think I want, you know, my initial structure fairly upright, so I'll prune just in front of the bud that's facing upwards, like that. There's a good bud here, I'll keep that. There's another one down low, so it'll get lots of branches in this area. That'll be more to choose from in the future. This one I have a bud facing forward. I'll prune just in front of that. There's a stub I can prune off here. And here I've got a bud here, so I'll prune to here. So there's my tree. It's down to basically, you know, a little stick that has a bit of taper and some branching. The warm weather is continuing at least for another week here in Ontario. The temperatures are staying above freezing, which is quite nice. That is all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.